we will be discussing on the 12th chapter, which is called Bhakti Yoga. So this chapter, even though it is very small, and it is at the end of the middle portion, that is middle Madhyama Shadga. But this chapter is very important because it in this chapter Krishna ultimately gives us a sadhana to reach him. Because that is the ultimate purpose of reading this Bhagavad Gita, that attaining Lord, Swadharma Jnana Vairagya Sadhya Bhakti Eva Gocharaha Narayana Parabrahma Gita Shastre Samirtaha. Bhagavad Gita, it's helping us to reach that Lord Krishna. And what is the sadhana? So how to reach him? So that is the main thing. We may know that we are soul and Lord is Supreme Lord, but we should know the way to reach him. If there is no way, then we will be suffering here and Lord will be waiting for us there. So the connection should be made, the way should be clear, the path should be proclaimed very properly so that we may reach that Lord very easily. So this chapter, this 12th chapter, is establishing the path to reach him. So what is the path? Devotion service. Ultimately, devotion service is the path. But what kind of devotion service that we should do? That is the question here. Because devotion service can be done in various ways. Devotion service can be done as a Angarupa, as a Sadhana Rupa, as a Palarupa also. So what kind of devotion service that we should do, that should be determined very clearly. So that's what Krishna is determining here. That's what he's establishing in this 12th chapter called Bhakti Yoga. And that's an interesting connection given here. Why this chapter is called Bhakti Yoga? Like every chapter has a particular name according to the things content discussed in the chapter is named. Like we have first chapter, Arjuna Vishada Yoga. It deals with Arjuna's distress, so it is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Second chapter is Sankhya Yoga. It's an analytical discussion of Atma and how to reach him and what is the quality or qualification or the characteristics of a person who has realized Atma. So it is basically dealing with Atma, so it is called Sankhya Yoga. And third chapter is Karma Yoga because it is predominantly discussing about Karma Yoga. So every chapter is discussing some predominant subject and the subject is named after that. But this chapter is called Bhakti Yoga. Why this chapter is predominantly called Bhakti Yoga? Even though Lord Krishna is consistently talking about Bhakti right from the second chapter. In second chapter, we have seen Mat Paraha. In third chapter, Krishna Igyartat Karmanon Yatra. In fourth chapter, we have Janma Karma Chame Divyam. In fourth chapter, Bhoktaram Igyatapasam. In fifth chapter, sorry. In sixth chapter, we have Yoginam Api Sarvesham. So in each and every chapter, Krishna is directly or indirectly indicating the importance of bhakti or the glories of bhakti. And in 7th, 8th, 9th chapter, there is no need to even say because in each and every chapter, Krishna is speaking the glories of bhakti and bhakta. So if that is the case, why this chapter is particularly called as Bhakti Yoga in comparison with other chapters? Because Acharyas, they give a very interesting analogy. It is said that in Ramayana, the Ramayana, whole Ramayana is very beautiful. That's why it is called Adi Kavya. Even though it is Itihasa, it is considered as Adi Kavya. Why? Because it is very beautiful. The way it is presented is beautiful. The shlokas are very beautiful. The meaning is beautiful. The comparison is beautiful. Lord is beautiful. His characters are beautiful. And his actions are beautiful. Everything is beautiful in Ramayana. Even though everything is beautiful, but if you see in Ramayana, there is a chapter called Sundarakanda. Sundarakanda means very beautiful chapter. Why that Sundarakanda is called Sundarakanda? Why not other kandas are called Sundara? Like we have Balakanda. In Balakanda, we can see Rama's appearance. We can see Rama Sita marriage. So in Balakanda, we can say that is Sundarakanda because it is speaking about Lord's qualities. It is speaking about Rama's marriage with Sita. So Sita Rama's qualities are mentioned. So it can be Sundarakanda. Ayodhya Kanda, it is predominantly discussing about Dharma. Rama is establishing Dharma to everyone. He is teaching Dharma to each and every person. Even to his mother, father, he is teaching Dharma. And no one can shake his Dharma. He is very fixed in his Dharma. So that can be called the Sundarakanda because he is establishing Dharma. That is the whole point of his appearance. So Dharma Samsthapanarthaya. So that can be called a Sundarakanda. And we have Aranyakanda. In Aranyakanda, we have many internal leelas with Sita. We can see many pastimes which are happening with between Rama and Lakshmana, Rama and Sita. So, because it is discussing about Madhurya Rasa between Sita Rama, so it can be called as Sundarakanda, but no. And in Kishkinda Kanda, we can see Rama's separation from Sita, this Vipralamba Bhava, that how he is thinking about Sita in separation and how he is crying for his beloved. So the love is more enhanced in separation. So we can see the Rama's love for Sita and Sita's love for Rama. So that is very beautiful to see. So that can be called a Sundarakanda. Or this Yuddhakanda can be Sundarakanda because at last Rama and Sita, they met each other after so much tragedy and suffering and war. That can be called a Sundarakanda. But why the portion which is dealing about Hanuman's jumping from a mountain to Lanka and having darshan of Sita and coming back and informing Rama, I have seen Sita. That's it. This portion is called a Sundarakanda. In the Sundarakanda, there is no description about Rama. There is not much description about Sita. There is only description about Hanuman. But this portion is called Sundarakanda. Why? Because from external point of view, we can say in that Sundarakanda, there are beautiful glorification or beautiful ornamental description about Rama and Sita's love that can be there. But predominantly, it speaks about the devotee, that is Hanuman's qualities. Because it is speaking about Hanuman's quality, devotee's quality, it is Sundarakanda. It is very beautiful. So the qualities about the Lord, they don't consider as very beautiful, but the qualities of devotees is considered more beautiful. That's why this portion which is dealing about the devotees is considered as more beautiful than other description. That's why it is called Sundarakanda, because it is dealing about devotees' quality. The same thing can be seen here. Lord enjoys the devotees' quality. How devotees, they give credit to the Lord, and similarly the Lord gives all the credits to the devotees. So ultimately, Lord Rama, when Hanuman said that I have seen Sita, Rama has completely given himself to Hanuman. That is more beautiful. That is the beautiful thing. It's not so great to understand how Lord is great. Yes, Lord is great. That is very natural thing, because He is most powerful. He is the creator. He is the controller. He is the maintainer. He is the sustainer. He is naturally great. He is naturally beautiful. But that Lord is becoming the devotee of His devotee. So this is more beautiful. This is enhancing the Lord's quality. This is more beautiful. This is the ornamental quality of the Lord, or this is the gem quality for the Lord, Bhakta Vatsalyatva. So Lord can have many qualities, but among those qualities, His main quality is Bhakta Vatsalya. Even though He is very great, He is very pleasing, He is very loving. He is surrendered Himself to His devotee. He has given Himself fully to His devotees. He is very easily attainable to His devotees. That is the most pleasing and most beautiful quality of the Lord. That's why it is called Sundarakanda, that He has given Himself to the Lord, to the devotee. Similarly, in this chapter, the 12th chapter, Krishna will speak, Bhaktaste ativa me priyaha, Yomad Bhakta Samaya priyaha. He will say, this devotee is very dear to me. This kind of devotee is very dear to me. This devotee is the most dearest person to me. So, in this 12th canto also, Krishna is going to reveal that this kind of devotee is very pleasing to me. I am ready to give myself to that devotee. So, because this 12th chapter is mostly discussing about devotee's quality, so that's why this chapter is called Bhakti Yoga. Like Sundarakanda, because it is speaking about devotee's quality. Similarly, in Bhagavad Gita, this 12th chapter, it is predominantly discussing about devotee's qualities. That's why it is called Bhakti Yoga. This is just an interesting analogy which is given by Acharya. Okay, yesterday we were discussing about Lord's Vishwarupa. So the Vishwarupa, in Vishwarupa, at the end of Vishwarupa, Lord has proclaimed that this form of mine is very difficult to naham vedai ranatapasa nadhane na ijjaya sakya evam vido drashtaman asim mam yatha. Krishna has just said that this form of mine cannot be seen by means of Veda, by means of Vedic studies or tapas or dana or yajna. So all these things are useless to see me. If that is the case, then why Vedas has to teach us different kinds of tapas, different kinds of dana, different kinds of yajna? Lord has said that Vedic studies cannot reach me. By tapas you cannot reach me. By dana you cannot reach me. By yajna you cannot reach me. Only by devotion you can reach me. Then why all these things are mentioned first of all in the Vedic literature? Why we have to mention all these things? Take painstakingly taking so much portion of the Vedas to discuss all these things, and at last you say these are all useless to know me. Why Vedas has to do that? Or is it Lord's opinion that we should give up all these things? The idea is without bhakti, Vedic knowledge is useless. Without bhakti, tapasya is useless. Without bhakti, dhana is useless. Without bhakti, yajna is useless. But if it is done with bhakti, then your Vedic study will have fruit. If you do with bhakti, tapas, then that tapas will have fruit. If you do dana with bhakti, then that dana will have fruit. If you do yajna with bhakti, then that yajna will have fruit. Otherwise, without bhakti, if you do anything, it has no any meaning. That is the whole point. So we should understand the purpose of all those things mentioned in the Vedas. Why Vedas speaking about different kinds of dana, yajna, tapa, shastra adhyayana? Why? Because it helps us to induce bhakti in us. If there is no bhakti, then just these activities, just by doing these activities, it will not give you the results. But if you do all these activities with bhakti, then ultimately it gives you the result, and also it gives you the mukhya result, or that is bhakti itself. So bhakti can be seen as anga form also. This are bhakti becomes an anga. Like for devotees, bhakti becomes a mukhya sadhana. For those who are doing shastra studies, those who are doing yajna, those who are doing puja, those who are doing dana, those who are doing tapas, for them bhakti become anga. Without bhakti, if you do tapas, then the tapas will become like a Hiranyakashipu's tapas. Without bhakti, if you do yajna, then that yajna will become like Ravana's yajna. So all those things which are mentioned in the Vedas, it has purpose. What is that? Ultimately, it has to induce devotion in us. Dharma swanishthataha pumsam visvakshena kadasoyaha na utpadayat yatiratim shramayevahi kevalam. So Vedas ultimately aiming us to develop this kind of attachment toward Lord. If this attachment towards Lord doesn't arise, then all our activities, even though it is a dharmic activity, even though it may look like it is a Vedic activity, then it is useless endeavor, because ultimately it doesn't serve the purpose. So that's what Krishna said, that this by means of this bhakti, what happens? A person who is just like an animal, he becomes like a human being, and because of that bhakti, he starts doing some good activities. When somebody is doing some good activities, when he adds bhakti in his activities, then his good activities will become Nishkama Karma Yoga. With Nishkama Karma Yoga, if he starts doing with Bhakti, if he starts doing Nishkama Karma Yoga, then that itself will give him purification of mind. With pure mind, if he starts doing Bhakti, and Bhakti becomes pure, then it gives Krishna. So this is just like a step-by-step process. So that's why Krishna is saying that this Bhakti can be a Sadhana Rupa also, can be Anga Rupa also, can be Phala Rupa also. It has to be Anga with all kinds of activities. And without Bhakti, there is no Phala, because Mantra Lopa, Tantra Lopa, Kriya Lopa. That whenever you do some activities, there are Mantra, Kriya, Tantra, so many Lopas, so many Aparadas are there. So even if you do any activity, any Vedic activity, if there is no Bhakti, then it becomes useless. But if Nama Sankirtanam Tava, if it is along with Nama Sankirtana, then all our activities gives us result. So Bhakti can be seen as a Anga Rupa also, Bhakti can be seen as a Phala Rupa also, and Bhakti can be seen as a Sadhana Rupa also. So Sadhana Rupa means it is for devotees. They do Bhakti as a sadhana to reach the Lord. So others, they do Bhakti to attain their goal. Others, they do Bhakti to rectify their mistakes and also to do their karma very well. So Bhakti can be seen in a different way. That's what this 12th chapter will discuss. How Bhakti differs from person to person, and what kind of Bhakti ultimately pleases the Lord, and how Bhakti leads. You can do any kind of Bhakti, but ultimately the Bhakti slowly it will purify you. It will bring you to the Lord. So that is the quality of Bhakti. So that's what in this 12th chapter that we are going to discuss.